Welcome back, AP Psychers. In today's video, we are going to be talking about one of the subjects that's going to get a lot of our attention going forward in Unit 9, and that's what we call Piaget's theory of cognitive development. I'm going to include the key icon because Piaget, as we would have talked about in class, is undoubtedly a key icon. His name frequently appears on the AP exam and is one of the more probable names that could appear on the FRQ this year. Before we talk about Piaget's theory of cognitive development, which is broken down into 4 different stages, I want to bring your attention to a mnemonic that I provide that will help you put in order each of these 4 stages. If you write the word specify and identify the 4 letters S, P, C, and F, doing so puts in order the 4 stages that we are about to overview. The first is the sensorial motor stage, which is from birth to 2. The pre-operational stage is from 2 to 7. The concrete operational stage is from 7 to 11. And then the formal operational stage is from about 11 for the rest of your life. And if you take the first letter of each of those 4 stages and put them in order, it partially spells out the word specify, the mnemonic that we use to put these 4 stages into order. We're now going to progress and look at each of these stages individually and identify what type of cognitive milestones and abilities are learned, at least according to Piaget. As we alluded to in the intro, the first stage is what we call the sensorial motor stage, and it's going to span from the years of approximately 0 to 2. According to Piaget, there are a few different skills which are learned in the sensorial motor stage. The first of which is what we call object permanence. Object permanence is not often learned until approximately 6 months, meaning for the first 6 months of a child's life, the phrase out of sight, out of mind is taken literally by children. If a toy is placed in front of them and then hidden under the bed, at least for that period of time, the child thinks that toy has completely vanished. They lack what's called object permanence, meaning if it's not in their eyesight, it's not in their line of vision, they simply do not know that it still exists. That could also be true with people. There's a reason why a 3-month-old finds peekaboo to be the most exciting game of all time, because it is literally a game of, here you are, and now you're gone forever, but now you're back. Object permanence is learned roughly at approximately 6 months. That coalesces with what we call stranger anxiety. Children learn to recognize faces at approximately 8 months, meaning an 8 or 9-month-old will be able to recognize their caregiver, their parents, their brothers and sisters, which happens to coalesce right around the time of object permanence, meaning beyond the 6 months, a child does in fact know that their mother or their caregiver or their father does still exist, even though they can't physically see them. The combination of stranger anxiety and object permanence can partially explain why towards 1 year, children begin to exhibit what's called separation anxiety, where if they are dropped off at a daycare or an unfamiliar situation, they exhibit degrees of anxiety. Why? They now know that their mother or their caregiver or their father, etc., still exists. And 2, additionally, they can actually recognize the fact that they are around strangers. This partially explains what we call separation anxiety. These are 2 of the skills that Piaget identified as being learned within the first 2 years. The second stage is what we call the pre-operational stage, with Piaget articulated as lasting from the years 2 through 7. This is the stage that kind of has the most going on, so this is definitely the stage that requires the most review. There are a few different skills that are learned during the pre-operational stage, and a few skills that are lacked. So I'm going to add a new category here. I'm going to write lacking. The first thing that children at this age lack is what's called conservation. I would advise watching the videos attached to this Prezi. I can try my best to simulate it right now, but I don't have the full capabilities of doing so. If you had a 3-year-old and showed them these 2 glasses of water, they have exactly the same amount of water in them, and you'd ask the child, do these glasses have the same amount of water? A 3-year-old would say, yeah, of course. But if you then took one of those glasses in front of the 3-year-old, if you know somebody this young who you can access without breaking social distancing, I'd advise doing so. And you were to pour that water right in front of their face into a different type of object, like this bowl here, and then ask them the question, which of these 2 has more water? A 3-year-old is more than likely going to identify this glass as having more water simply because the line, the water marker, is higher up on the glass. They would simply look at these two and say, well, this one's higher up. This one has more water. Although you confirmed with them ahead of time that they have the exact same amount, you poured it into this object in front of their face. Doesn't matter. A child who is 3 years old lacks what we call conservation. Additionally, a child at this age lacks what's called a theory of mind. There is a clip on the Prezi that goes into a theory of mind for about 2 or 3 minutes. I'll try very briefly to explain it. Let's say we were in the classroom and the green markers were always right attached to the board. And that's sort of universally where they are always located. Let's say a 3-year-old walked into my class, though, and took the green marker and hid it under one of the desks in the class, or maybe inside one of the desks, so that that student or that 3-year-old was the only person on earth that knew the location of this green marker. If you would ask that 3-year-old, where is Mr. G or where is one of the students going to look first for the green marker? An adult, you, me, individuals who are out of this stage would logically say, well, if the green marker is supposed to be on the whiteboard, anyone is just going to simply look at the whiteboard. That's the most logical location to look. A 3-year-old, however, lacks what's called theory of mind and doesn't realize that those around them didn't experience the same phenomenon, didn't experience the movement of the marker in the first place. So the 3-year-old is going to claim, oh, Mr. G is going to check in this desk. I know it's in this desk. Of course, Mr. G knows it's in this desk. This is one of the best explanations for why a 3-year-old is really confused why their parents can't find their favorite toy, because they know where it is. Shouldn't you also know where it is? I put it under the bed in a place I never put it, but because I know it's there, you should too. Children lack what's called theory of mind. They actually usually acquire this around 5, which would then make it a new skill, but at least early on in the pre-operational stage, children lack this. One thing that might not be considered a skill, but might be considered what we call a feature of the pre-operational stage, is what we call egocentric thinking. When a child exhibits egocentric thinking, they have a difficult time taking the perspective of other people, and it's more than just someone who seems egotistical and always wants things to be going their way. If a child was looking at a plate of food and asked across the room to somebody else, what am I looking at? The child would assume that everybody can see what they can see, and would be confused why their mother or their father or their caregiver in another room didn't realize that they were out of chicken fingers or needed more ketchup, and might sit there angry and question, why don't you realize I'm out of ketchup? I'm looking at my plate. I can see that I am out of ketchup. Why can you not see that I am out of ketchup, even though you're 15 feet away? Egocentric thinking is very literal. The belief that what you see is what everybody else sees. In the pre-operational stage, we really begin to see children develop cognitive skills for the first time, but they are extremely, extremely limited. They lack conservation. At least for the majority of this phase, they lack theory of mind. For the majority of the phase, they exhibit what's called egotistical thinking. That's also one that's usually gone around 5. The third stage is what we call the concrete operational stage, and we're looking at the years of about 7 to 11. A couple new skills clearly developed by this age. Children at this point definitely have conservation, and their math skills really begin to take off. They can start to do math sort of transformational problems, which is a big advance. So those are really some of the skills. What they are lacking clearly is what we call abstract thought, or hypothetical thinking. It would be very challenging to sit down with a 7-year-old and really teach them how to play chess or checkers well. You could probably teach them the basic outline of the rules, because a feature of the concrete operational stage is logical thinking. I'm going to stress up here, very logical thinking, meaning a child could understand the rules, but if you were to explain to a 7-year-old, it actually advances your position if you give up this piece. You are more likely to win if you sacrifice this piece. A child who is 7 is going to be so stuck on the idea of sacrificing a piece because they are overly logical that they're going to be unable to grasp this abstract hypothetical concept, unable to think so far ahead, to acknowledge that it's actually in their advantage to do so. Children lack the ability to make really well-formed hypothesis statements at this age, and although you can certainly teach them elements of science, they're going to have a very difficult time thinking multiple steps ahead, whether that's in science, whether that's in a board game, or whether that's in really any area. So huge, over-the-top logic, dramatically lacking abstract thought. One interesting thing to note, it is around this age that if you do not tell a child the realities of Santa and the Easter Bunny, Tooth Fairy, fairy tales like that, children will begin to question due to their over-the-top logical thinking. They'll start to realize none of those stories really make sense in the world that I've been living in. Is Santa actually real? If you never tell a child is more than likely going to begin to question those things in and around this age on their own, even without interactions with their peers or without any interaction with someone who has told them otherwise. The final Piaget stage is what we call the formal operational stage, which is 11 into the rest of your life. I'm in the formal operational stage. You are in the formal operational stage. Everybody who's had a Ponikwit is in the formal operational stage, or the formal operation stage. There's really nothing that's lacking here. And in terms of new skills, what was lacking in the previous stage is now acquired. So we have hypothetical or abstract thought, which you could argue is really the feature of this stage, meaning children at this age would really be able to succeed playing a game like chess, a game like checkers, really advanced games that require multiple steps ahead. They would be able to make really well-refined hypothesis statements. That's why you see the sciences really start to pick up around the age of 11, and the expectations for what a child can and cannot do really starts to pick up. Looking back on Piaget, and this was included in the Prezi, most psychologists today consider Piaget to have underestimated the skills of children. There have been countless studies that show that if you teach a child the right way or you provide the information in the right manner, children can pick up things like conservation a little earlier, abstract thought a little earlier. It's not as black and white as Piaget would make you think, but nevertheless, still a major contributor to our field in developmental psychology and even educational psychology.